We're in DAF Lamed Aleph Amid Aleph. Excuse me. My place mark was misplaced. Okay. The Mishnah had said on yesterday's DAF, Nachri shehilves Yisrael al chemtzo achar haPesach muter bahana, that if a Gentile lends money to a Yisrael and he takes his collateral chametz, so then after Pesach that chametz is permitted because it's considered to be in the possession of the Gentile, the creditor, over Pesach. If you have the opposite situation, that a Yisrael lends a non-Jew money and takes chametz as collateral, then that chametz is aser bahana if the creditor had possession of the chametz over Pesach. Now this is the subject of the machlokus between Aryai and Rava. Aryai and Rava discuss a choshen mishpat halacha, a purely monetary halacha, which has to do with what is the status of collateral during the course of a loan before the loan matures and the debtor defaults on the loan. So Aryai says that the creditor is considered to having taken possession of the collateral retroactively from the time of the loan. And Rava says no, he only takes possession of the collateral from the time that the debtor defaults on the loan, but not retroactively. Now that has to be, so these two opinions have to be superimposed to the opinion of our Mishnah. So it would seem that our Mishnah goes only like Aryai, who talks about a retroactive ownership of the chametz by the Jew who's the creditor, or vice versa by the goy who's the creditor, depending upon the case, and not like Rava. So this is immediately going to present itself as a problem according to Rava. So the Gemara's question now, Umi Amar Rava Hachi, which is 3, 6, about 8 or 9 lines down. Umi Amar Rava Hachi. How could Rava have said that it's only mikanu lahaba, that it's non-retroactive, but that the creditor takes possession of the collateral only at the time of the default? So v'ha'amar Rami bar Chama, what about the following case? Reuven shemachar sada l'Shimon be'achrayas. Let's look at the following case. Reuven sells a field to Shimon with achrayas. Now, when you sell a piece of real estate with achrayas, what that means is that the seller assumes full responsibility for the title search and to make sure that the land is free and clear, such that if it turns out that the land was actually, there was a lien on the property, and as a result the land gets seized from the buyer, the seller has to make good on the loss that was incurred by the buyer by having the land taken away, and he's got to compensate whatever the buyer paid out. He's got to compensate him back. Okay, so that's what it means that Reuven sold him the field with achrayas. V'zaknolav b'milva, and then they did a mortgage agreement. So basically, Shimon doesn't have the money to pay to Reuven for this piece of real estate. Let's say it's $100,000 piece of real estate. Shimon doesn't have the money, so he says, here's the mortgage paper, and I owe you $100,000 for the property that I purchased from you. Umeis Reuven, and Reuven passes away. Ve'asa bal chov de Reuven v'tarif lei mi Shimon. And then Reuven's creditor comes, and he says that this land had a lien on it from the time when Reuven was still alive. This land was part of Reuven actually was a debtor to me, and he defaulted on a loan, and so I'm taking this land as payment for my debt. V'asa Shimon upaisei bezuze. And then Shimon says, you know what? Instead of seizing the property, here's $100,000. I happen to come up with it, and he gives it to Reuven's creditor. Okay, so now Shimon's still got possession of the land. He's paid in full for the property, but instead of paying it to Reuven's estate, because Reuven is dead, he's paid it to Reuven's creditor. Okay? Dinahu da'asu b'nei Reuven v'amrilei l'Shimon. So the halacha would allow technically for the orphans, the heirs of Reuven, to be able to make the following claim to Shimon. Anon metaltali shavak avun gabach, o metaltali diasmi lebal choiv lo mishtabdi. That we are the Yisomim, we are the heirs of the estate, and the halacha is that when heirs are encumbered with debt from their father, the only thing that the creditor is allowed to collect from the estate is real estate. The creditor is not allowed to collect chattel or cash that is lying around in the estate of the Yisomim. So this debt that you owed our father is considered to be like chattel. It's a non-tangible asset of our father's estate that is not real. It's not a real estate. It's an intangible asset of the estate, and therefore it's not something that you can say that you had a right to give away to our father's creditor. Our father's creditor was able to collect the land, but you decided not to give him the land from the estate. You gave him the debt that we own, and you paid him the $100,000 that you owed to us. So that's cash. So that debt still is something that we own. You can't say that you've washed away the debt by paying the creditor. We still own that debt, and so therefore you still owe us $100,000. And basically, they can say to Shimon, "You still have to pay us."
In other words, if the Baal Chov went to the Yisraelim, he would not be able to collect. Is that correct?
If the Baal Chov went to the Yisraelim, he would be able to collect, but only the real estate. He'd be able to collect the property.
Right.
But Shimon chose to hold on to the property, and he paid him and said, "Here's $100,000." So basically, the Yisomim are saying to him, "Shkoyach, you did a nice thing, but we still own a debt. We own a piece of paper, we own a mortgage that you signed that you owe us $100,000. That's not something that you can give to a creditor and say that you're paying off the estate. You're not authorized to do that, because a creditor can't seize a non-tangible. He can't seize a mortgage, he can't seize cash. So therefore, what you did was a nice thing. You did us a favor by getting this guy off of our back, but you still owe us the money. That's the issue over here. Now, so hold on a second. Va'amar Rava, it gets more complicated. Rava says now, I pikeach Shimon magbulahu ara v'hadar gabi minayu. So if Shimon is a pikeach, if he's a wise man and he wants to be able to get the Yisomim off his back, here's what he should do. He says, "Okay, no problem. I hear you. I still owe you $100,000. You know what? Instead of giving you cash, I'm going to give you back the piece of real estate. That'll be the payment for the debt of $100,000, because it's worth $100,000. So here it is. Here's the land." And he shakes hands, and then he says, "Okay, Chevra, now give it back." Because basically what he's saying is that, look, any real estate is collectible from the estate of Yisomim. Your father owes me that real estate. That's a debt that was owed by your father, because I paid his debt to his creditor, and because I paid his debt to his creditor, he owes your father's estate, and your father and his estate owe me money for that payment, and now give me back the real estate. I'm allowed to collect real estate from the estate of Yisomim. The only thing I can't collect is chattel and intangibles, but I can collect real estate, so give me the real estate. That's what the guy's allowed to do. So now, I omart bishlam lemafreya hu gova amatu lehachi chozer v'gova osa mehen de command de gobu mechayim de avu hondami. So if you tell me that the creditor of Reuven was as if he owned the piece of property while Reuven was still alive, then it makes very good sense why Shimon could say to the Yisomim, "Look, this property, like Rashi explains, if you're going to tell me that retroactively this property that belonged to their father, so it's as if that he'd already collected it from the time that their father was alive. So basically what Shimon is able to say to the Yisomim, he says, like Rashi explains, that your father accepted achrayus when he sold me the property, and he said that if anyone were to come and seize that property, he would make good on it. So that is a debt that he promised to me, so that basically your father had a debt of real estate to me from the time that he was alive. and therefore that debt does not accrue upon his demise when his creditor comes, but that debt accrues from the time that he made that commitment to me. He said it works lamafreya. And therefore, now that you guys have real estate back in your estate, I can go back and seize that based upon the collateral, that promise that your father made to sell me, to give me the piece of real estate with achrayas, with his guarantee. So therefore, since it works retroactively, it's as if this debt that your father made was retroactive from the time that he was alive, and therefore I can seize the property. But if it only works at the time when the guarantee is defaulted, which means at the time when the creditor came to try and seize the property, so then hahavi keman dezavin yasmi nichse dame. So he says, then why does Shimon have a right to take back the property from them? It's like an asset that they only accrued after the father's death. In other words, it's a debt that came to the estate after the father's death. Like Rashi explains, if you're going to tell me that anyone who's collecting real estate in exchange for his debt only acquires it from the time of collection, then what right does Shimon have to take that real estate from them? It's like the Yisomim acquired the land now. It's not like it goes back retroactively. So how can that land be indebted? How can there be a lien on it to any creditor? So you have to say that we look at this piece of real estate as if there was a lien on it from the time, and it was accrued to Shimon from the time that the sale was made when Reuven was still alive. Basically, the Gemara is making an argument that Rava has to acknowledge that there's a retroactivity taking place in order for this system to work, in order for this chap to work. That Rava says that if Shimon is a pikeach, there's a chap that he can do to give them back the real estate and then take it back. But the only way that it'll work is if there's retroactivity on a debt, that the collateral that is promised works retroactively, that once the person defaults on the guarantee or the promise to pay back the loan, then retroactively from the time that debt is created, it becomes the property of the creditor. In this case, the creditor being Shimon. So the ilu kani yasmi nichse mikam ishtabli lebal chayv, and when the Yisomim are kaina karka after their father's death, since when can a bal chayv come along and seize that? So obviously it has to be working retroactively. So the Gemara says no. Shaini Hasam, the Amar Lahu, because really Shimon can say to them the following statement: Ki hechi de mishtabadna le la avuchon, mishtabadna nami la ba'al chov da avuchon midereb nasam. No, it's not working using retroactivity over here, but rather the reason why Shimon can claim that he can seize this property is basically because just like I became meshubad to your father, like if you take a look at Rashi explains, La'ola mikanu lahabahu goiva. Really, the creditor is only collecting from now onwards. Umay da'amar Rav Nachman ba'alma bal choiv choser v'gova osa mehen, and that which Rav Nachman had said, that the creditor can come and seize the assets from them, is mishum da'amar lahen bal chov liyasomim, because the creditor can say to the yasomim, mikoach mi basam v'gibisam karkazu, is he can say to them, by what right do you have to seize this property? Mikoach shibud shalavichen, based upon the lien that your father has on this property. Behecha de mishtabadna la'avuchon, or de mishtabda la'avuchon karkazu shaloiva shalava me'avichem mishtabda milididi shahisa malve shalavichen. So that just like this land was promised to your father, v'chihecha de mishtabda la'avuchon karkazu, just like this land was liened, or your father had a lien on this property, shalova shalava me'avichem, and therefore it was La'avichem karka zu shaloi ve'shalava me'avichem mishtabda nami l'didi shehayisa malva shel avichem. Just like the property of the person who borrowed money from your father, this land is the land of that borrower, that your father has a lien on it. So too, I who lent money to your father, the lien goes to me as well. V'hamechuyav lo klum meshubadli midar Rabbi Nassan. And basically use the transitive property of Rabbi Nassan. Rabbi Nassan had said, if you take a look at the Gemara, the Tanya, Rabbi Nassan Omer, Minayin lenosha v'chavero mana v'chavero b'chavero shemotzin mizeh v'nostin lazeh. How do you know that if you have three people, you have Levi borrows money from Shimon and Shimon borrows money from Reuven? How do you know that if Levi has the money to pay back, we take the money and give it directly from Levi back to Reuven, and we don't have to go through Shimon? Since Shimon is both a creditor and a debtor, we take the money from Levi and we transfer it immediately over to Reuven, who is the ultimate debtor. Talmud lomar v'nosan la'asher osham lo. As it says that you shall give it to he who is ultimately owed the money. So therefore, even though the whole way that Reuven can get the money is only via Shimon, but since Reb Nassan says we can use the transitive property, we can completely circumvent Shimon and give the money directly to Reuven. So basically, the way it's working over here is that even though the debt that is being accrued, in other words, basically, you Yisomim, you have a creditor. The creditor is the creditor of your father. So basically, he has a right to the land. But that creditor owes me money because I gave him $100,000 for the estate already. So basically, I am the creditor of your father's creditor. So therefore, if I'm the creditor of your father's creditor, so then instead of giving the land to your father's creditor because you haven't paid him back the land yet, give it directly to me because I laid out money to your father's creditor. So I'm the creditor of your father's creditor, and that's the reason why I get the land back. It's got nothing to do with retroactivity. It's got to do with the fact that since your father's creditor owes me money because he doesn't have a right to take both the land and cash, so basically I have a right to go directly to the debtor of my debtor and take the land directly from him. And the Yisomim happen to be the debtor of my debtor. You owe money to the person who owes me money. I gave that man who had the lien on the property, I gave him $100,000. But you haven't, so fine. So maybe I wasn't authorized to do that on behalf of the Yisomim. Fine, I don't have a problem with that. So I still owe you guys $100,000. So here's the land, I'm paying you back. Now, you owe the land to the creditor of your father.
But he paid them.
What?
But he paid them.
Who paid?
Shimon.
Yes, he did, but that doesn't free the Yisomim from their chov. No, of course not.
That was like given money, you're saying.
Basically, he gave the guy money because if the Yisomim are claiming that you had no right to take
so
money,
he owes me that money.
So basically, so then the debt is still standing. So that's the reason why Shimon can go over to the Yisomim and say, fine, what I did was not authorized by your estate. I couldn't do it on behalf of your estate. So then you still owe money. You still owe the land to your father's creditor. So instead of giving him the land, give it straight to me. That's the way that it's working over here, and therefore you have no challenge to Rava. Rava still does not hold of retroactivity. He says that the debt accrues mikanu lahaba.
So then I have a question with Talton and Karka and all these questions that we came up with that we need to go into the spore of retroactive. In other words, the reason we got onto the whole spore of retroactive is because there was a problem, right? That of the cash being paid and then needing to call up the karka.
I don't understand what you're asking.
I'm saying, in other words, the first spore that we had of retroactivity, right? The first spore that we had that was supportive of a BAYT, right? So that
you're talking about our Mishnah?
No, the spore that we just had now, in terms of the support that we gave to a BAYT.
No, we were actually asking that Rava himself has to hold of retroactivity. This wasn't a challenge to Rava from Abaye. It was not a support to Abaye, but rather a challenge on Rava.
Okay.
Because Rava is the author of the statement. Rava is the one who said that here's the chap. The chap is that Reuven can give them back, Shimon can give the land to the Yisomim and then seize it back from them.
Right.
The question is that only works if the collection is retroactive, if the collateral is retroactive, because if it's from Mikanu Lahaba, then it's considered to be coming to the Yisomim's estate post-mortem. And a creditor can't take money from the estate of Yisomim if the assets only came post-mortem. So the Gemara answers, you're right, even though the assets come to them post-mortem, but still, the lien on the property to their creditor, to the father's creditor, started when the father was still alive. And even though this new debt accrues after Reuven's death, but it's irrelevant, because once they owe money to the creditor, and the creditor owes money to Shimon, Shimon can go straight to the Yisomim and say, we'll circumvent the middleman and give it straight to me. Okay, let us go weiter. Tanan. Now let's look at our Mishnah. Now we're challenging Rava from our Mishnah. Tanan, Nachri shehilva es Yisrael al chemtzo, achar ha-pesach muter bahana. That if a non-Jew is the lender, and he lends a Yisrael money, and he takes collateral of chametz, right? So then after Pesach, it's considered that the chametz was in the possession of the Nachri, and it's not chametz shavar alav ha-pesach, and the chametz is muter. So Iomart Bishlam Lamafreya who goiva amatu lahachi muter bahana. So this works out well according to Aryai, who says that collateral is accrued to the creditor retroactively from the time of the loan. Ela Iomart Mikanu lahaba who goiva amai muter bahana birshusa di Yisrael havakoi. But if you're going to tell me that it only works from Mikanu lahaba at the time of the default of the loan, so then it turns out that all of Pesach it was still in the rishus of the Yisrael. So then why should it be muter? That's the question. So the Gemara answers, Hacha b'mayaskinon kishihirhino etzlo. The answer is that even Rava will agree that it works retroactively when not only is the chametz designated as collateral, but Reuven takes the chametz out of his property and puts it into the property of the Gentile. Then, when Reuven defaults on the loan, even Rava agrees, when Shimon defaults on the loan, then even Rava agrees that it retroactively the chametz accrues to the possession of the Gentile. Okay, that's the chiddush the Gemara is saying. So that our Mishnah is according to everybody in a case where the Yisrael actually physically gave the chametz to the Nachri before Pesach. So now the Gemara says, Lema kitanai. Let us suggest this machloikes Abai and Rava is a machloikes tanoi. The Brisa says, Yisrael shehil v'lanachri al chemso. Now here, in this case, the Yisrael is the lender. The Yisrael lends the money to a Nachri, and the Nachri allots to him collateral, which is chametz. La'achar ha-Pesach eino over. Then after Pesach, the Jew is not in violation. And Mishum Reb Meir amru oiver. And Rabbi Meir says, no, the Jew is oiver. So my lav b'haka miflagi, demar savar l'mafreya hu gova, mar savar kamanu lahaba hu gova. That the machloikus is as follows. So that if you hold that the Yisrael is not over, it's because what? It's because he didn't take possession of it until after Pesach. And so therefore there's no chametz shavar lav ha-Pesach, even though the collateral was assigned over to him from before, but there's no retroactivity. It's only according to Reb Meir, who says that there is retroactivity, that it's considered to be that the Yisrael collected it even before Pesach, and therefore it's chametz shavar lav ha-Pesach and it's aser. Frek the Gemara v'tisbra, can you really assume that that's the machlokes? Ema Seifa, look at the second part. Aval nachri shehilva liYisrael al chemso la'achar ha-Pesach divrei kol oiver. But in the opposite case, when the Nachri is the lender and the Yisrael is the borrower, and the Yisrael designates chametz as collateral, then everyone agrees that the Yisrael is oiver, even though the collateral was designated to the Nachri. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. V'ha'ibcha mi boile. Lamando amar hasam eno over, hacha over. Lamando amar hasam over, hacha eno over. If you're going to tell me that the machlokes is whether we say retroactivity or mikanu lahaba, so then whatever was stated in the first case should be an exact opposite of the latter case. The first case is where the Yisrael is the lender and the Goy is the borrower. The second case is where the Nachri is the lender and the Yisrael is the borrower. So just reverse the opinions. If it's just a case of retroactivity versus non-retroactivity. Why does everyone agree that when the Nachri is the lender and the Yisrael is the borrower is over and Bal Yirah and it's Chametz Shavar Lav HaPesach? So Elahacha b'mayaskinon kigon shirhino etzlo. But rather, the machloikis is in that brisa as well, when the borrower physically brought over the chametz and gave it to the lender, and this is the machloikis. In other words, like Rashi says that below here, the kuli alma mikan al haba, when there's no bringing over of the chametz, even Abaye agrees that it only works mikan al haba. The collateral does not become into the possession of the creditor unless it doesn't come into the possession of the creditor until the default of the loan. But here we're talking about where the chametz was physically brought to the lender, and now we have a machlokis in Rabbi Yitzchak. The Omer Rabbi Yitzchak minayin lebal chov shekona mashkon. How do you know that a creditor acquires a mashkon that comes into his possession, that acquires collateral that comes into his possession? Shenamar l'cha tiyeh tzedakah. Because the Torah says it shall be for you an act of charity. Now, what is the case over there? The Torah says that when you lend a poor man money and he has a night garment, like a blanket, that you take as collateral, then you have an obligation to give him that blanket to sleep with every night. In other words, you can keep the garment during the day, the blanket during the day, but at night you have to return it to him so that he has something to sleep with. And the Torah says that if you do that, it'll be an act of charity. So, im eino koina mashkon tzedakah minayin, mikan lebal chav shekona mashkon. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, why does the Torah call it an act of charity if the creditor doesn't already acquire the blanket? So from here you see that the creditor actually acquires the collateral as soon as it comes into his possession. He doesn't have to wait until the borrower defaults on the loan.
So if that's the case, why don't I just sell the chametz on tonight? From the Nachri.
One second. You can do a lot of different things, but you didn't. This is actually what you did do. And the question therefore is it Chamer Shavuot of Pesach or not? So let's just go back to the case. Tanakama Savar Hani Mili Yisrael Mi Yisrael Hu De Karina Beilachati Et Tzedakah Avol Yisrael Mi Nachri Lo Kani. So the machlokus is as follows. The Tanakama says that the only time that we say that the collateral accrues to the creditor is only when you're dealing with a Yisrael lender and a Yisrael borrower, where there's a mitzvah of tzedakah, where there's a relationship that allows for an act of charity, right? So because of that, we say that the collateral accrues to the creditor in that scenario. But in a situation where a Yisrael minachri lo kani, but if the Yisrael is the lender and the nachri is the borrower, so then the collateral does not accrue to the Yisrael, because this relationship of the collateral accruing to the creditor only applies when there's a Yisrael and a Yisrael. But if the collateral is owned by a nachri Yisrael, the Torah does not give that allowance that the collateral automatically belongs to the lender. The Rabbi Meir savar kal v'chomer Yisrael kan Yisrael minachri lo kolshkein. Rabbi Meir disagrees, and he says no, that if the nachri is the borrower, then it's a kal v'chomer. If the Torah takes away the collateral of a Yisrael borrower and gives it to the creditor, then surely the Torah will take away the collateral of a nachri borrower and give it to a Yisrael. So Rabbi Meir therefore says that when the nachri is the borrower and he designates his chametz, then you are over. Then you violated the ownership of chametz, because the collateral of the nachri now becomes like it's yours. It becomes yours. That's the first case, when the Yisrael is the lender and the nachri is the borrower. Avol nachri shehilvas Yisrael al chemtzu achar Pesach. But if the nachri is the lender and the Yisrael is the borrower, so divrei akol over. So then everyone agrees that the collateral does not accrue to the creditor in that case, and therefore the Yisrael, who's the borrower, who's got the chametz, even though he brought it over to the nachri, it still does not accrue to the nachri. Why? Because hasam vadei nachri mi Yisrael lo kani. Because there the Torah for sure does not allow for that kind of relationship. The Torah only talks about ulachati et tzedakah when there's a tzedakah relationship between the lender and the borrower. Here, for sure, there is no tzedakah relationship between the lender and the borrower. The lender is a nachri, the borrower is a Yisrael, and therefore, for sure, in that case, everyone would agree that the collateral does not accrue over to the creditor, and therefore, everyone would agree that the Yisrael borrower is oiver on owning chametz on Pesach, because the collateral is still his, even when he brings it over to the possession of the lender nachri. Now, this is going to be problematic for our Mishnah. That's why the Gemara immediately launches into the discussion of the Mishnah. Let's go look at the Mishnah again. Tana Nachri Shehilva Es Yisrael Al Chemso. Our Mishnah had said that when a Nachri is the lender and a Yisrael is the borrower, Achar HaPesach Mutter Bahana. So then after Pesach, the chametz is mutter. So it seems like, according to our Mishnah, it's not like what you just said. It's a contradiction to the Bryce. It seems like from our Mishnah that it automatically belongs to the Nachri. So Nihi Nami Tirhino Etzlaha Amar to Nachri Misrael Lokani. So granted, says the Gemara, that the collateral was brought over physically to the lender Nachri, but still you've just gotten through telling me that there is no acquisition of collateral until the default of the loan when a Nachri is the lender. So how come our Mishnah says that it's mutter bahana, that it's considered to be the possession of the Nachri if the Nachri never took possession? So the Gemara answers lo kasha. It's not a contradiction. So the Gemara makes another ukimta. The Gemara says we're not only talking about where the chametz was physically brought over to the Nachri lender, but we're talking about where the stipulation of the loan was that the Yisrael says, if I don't pay you back, then even from now, retroactively, I want you to acquire the chametz. In that situation, both Abai and Rava agree that since there was an explicit stipulation that there should be retroactive acquisition, that explicit stipulation helps. So the Gemara says, "Uminat temer deshani le ben hechad da'amar me'achshav ben hechad lo'amar me'achshav." How do you know that this explicit stipulation will change the halacha? Detanya nachri shehirhin paspurni etzel Yisrael eino oiver. Because of the following brisa, it says that if a nachri is a borrower and he gives a Yisrael a loaf of bread, it's called pasporni, Rashi explains, because in the times of the Gemara, they didn't have, most bread was not baked into loaves, it was baked into lafa, like we see, because they slapped the dough, small portions of dough on the sides of the oven. Pasporni was the abnormal kind of bread, which was baked on a loaf in a baking pan, the way that we have loaves of bread today. It was worth, therefore, more money because it was more dough. And so, therefore, if a goy gives that to a Yisrael as collateral on a loan, eino oiver. So then the Jew is not oiver and bal yirah if it's in his possession over Pesach. Because why? Because it's still the goy's collateral. However, v'im amar lo higaticha oiver. But if the goy says when he gives him the loaf of bread, here's the payment, meaning that you don't, he says higaticha, which means this is it. This is my fulfillment of the loan, and stipulating essentially that if I default on the loan, then this is your payment me'achshav from now. So then the Yisrael is over on owning chametz on Pesach because the goy said me'achshav. So ma'ishna reisha ma'ishna seifa elalav shma mina shani heichad amar le me'achshav heichad amar le me'achshav shma mina. So that conclusively proves that when the stipulation is made that the collateral shall belong to the creditor retroactively as soon as the default is done, so then everyone would agree that it belongs to the lender retroactively, and whoever is the creditor, therefore, is going to determine the status of the chametz. If the lender is a Gentile, then the chametz is mutter. If the lender is Yisrael, then the chametz is aser. Tana Rabbanan. And now we finish off this sugya of chametz shavar lav haPesach with the final general halachic statement. Chanush shel Yisrael umalai shel Yisrael upolim nachrim nichnasim l'sham chametz shenimser sham achar Pesach aser bahana vein tzarich lomer ba'achila. If you have a store that's owned by a Jew, the merchandise is owned by a Jew. The only Gentile component of this is the workers. The cashier is a Gentile. That's not going to make a difference. After Pesach, all the chametz in the store is aser bahana and certainly aser ba'achila.
Why would it make a difference?
Because you might have argued that since the Gentile is the one who's bartering and exchanging the chametz, maybe that mitigates things, and the Bryce is telling you that it doesn't. But if you look at the converse case, Chanu shel nachri umalai shel nachri upola yisrael nichnasin v'yotzin l'sham chametz shenimser sham achar Pesach muter ba'achila vein tzarich lomer bahana. In the opposite case, where the store is owned by the Gentile, let's say a Sobeys, and the merchandise is owned by a Gentile, and the cashier happens to be Jewish, so then after Pesach, everything is permitted, not only bahana, but also ba'achila as well. So that's the final.
Even though Yiddish music is playing.
Even though Yiddish music is playing, even though the cashier is wearing a shaitel, it's still, everything is still mutter bahana.
It just happened in Sobeys.
Right. Yeah. Okay, let's go on. We got to finish off. Chametz shenaf lolav mapoilas. If chametz falls, a collapsing building collapses onto chametz, so it's very, very hard to retrieve. Harehu kimavur. It's considered to be disposed of, and therefore there's no requirement for you to get a backhoe to come and move around the rubble to be able to retrieve the chametz. It's like the proverbial Cheerios. It gets caught in the seat, in the crack in the seat. Do you have to take apart the automobile seat in order to retrieve the Cheerio? So this is the similar kind of situation, and you'll see in just a second. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Oimer Kol Shein HaKelev Yachol Lachapes Acharav. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel disagrees. He's more machmir, and he says that if a dog can sniff it out and dig for it, then you're still your chametz and you have to get rid of it. So the Gemara now says, Amar Rav Chisda v'tzarch shiavato b'libo. Under all circumstances, even when we give you a heter not to retrieve the chametz, you have to do bittul. You have to say kol chamira v'chamia to divest ownership of it. Tana kama chafisas hakelev. So the Brisa now says, according to Shimon Gamliel, who says that a dog can sniff it out, it's still yours. It's still, you have to get rid of it. How deep does it have to be under rubble? So the Gemara says shlosha tfachim. If it's 3 tfachim deep buried underneath rubble, that's 3 tfachim deep, so then you no longer have to retrieve it. It's considered to be out of the scent of a dog. So Amar le Ravacha bereda Rav Yosef le Ravashi had Amar Shmuel ksafim ein lahem shmira ela bekarka mi ba'inin shlosha tfachim olo. So we know that there's a halach in Choshen Mishpat that says as follows, that when I am given money for safekeeping, if that money is stolen from me, the owner of the money can always claim that I was negligent unless I take one specific action, which is to bury the money underground, because that's the only secure method of storing money. There are no safes. There are no real safes that are free from breaking into. So the only surefire method of security is by burying the money underground. If I don't bury the money, then I can't claim, well, I protected it, because there's no protection unless it's buried. So the question now is, how deep do you have to bury it? Does it have to also be buried 3 tfachim deep like this chametz? So his response to him was, Amalei hacha mishum reicha ba'inan shlosha tfachim hasa mishum ichsuye me'enahu v'lo boi shlosha. He says, no, it's different. He says, the scent of a dog has to do with the smell of the chametz. This has to just do with the requirement to hide the money has to do with making sure that no one can see it. And as long as you bury it so that no one can see it, you're okay. Vikama, so how deep does it have to be in that scenario? Amar from Bar Papa Misichra, so Raf from Bar Papa from Sichra said it has to be a tefach deep underground. I guess if it's not a tefach deep, it's subject to discovery much more easily, and therefore that's not even considered to be concealed at all. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Ha'ochel trumas chametz bepesach b'shogeg mishalim keren v'choimish. That if a person eats the truma that is chametz on Pesach, he eats a Kohen's truma. So if he does it b'shogeg, if he does it unintentionally, he has to pay back keren v'chaimish. He has to pay back the principal, plus he has to pay back an additional 25%. But b'mezid pater mitashlumin umidimei eitzim. But if he consumes the truma intentionally, so then he doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to pay at all. He doesn't even have to pay Demei Eitzim, which means even if the truma was tamei and was only usable as fuel, he doesn't even have to make restitution for that. Now let's explain the difference. The Torah requires me, when I consume something, Kohen's truma b'shogeg, the Torah requires me to pay him back produce to atone for my deprivation of his truma. And if I steal apples from him, I got to give him back apples, and those apples reacquire their status of kedusha. And the Torah therefore designates that as being kadosh, and I have to pay 25% in addition to that, sort of as a way to get atonement for it. The Torah, when I eat something of a Kohen's b'mezid, I'm not making restitution in order to make the Kohen whole again and to replace his truma. I'm doing it because I'm a gazlan. I'm just a stama gazlan. And I have to pay back the monetary value of whatever I stole. What is the monetary value of truma on a chametz truma on Pesach? It has no value. Because it's aser b'hana, it has zero value. And as such, because I consumed it on Pesach, because I did it b'mezid, I don't have to pay you anything at all. And that's the difference between shogeg and mezid. Shogeg is not because I stole from you, I have to make restitution. It's because I deprived you of something holy, I have to bring back that holiness into the world and give it back to you. So therefore, it doesn't matter what its monetary value was, I have to replace that produce, and it reacquires kedusha once I give it back to the Kohen. So therefore, it's irrelevant what its value is. When it's b'mezid, it's a monetary requirement of restitution, and therefore, since it had no value, I don't have to pay you anything at all.
So the Kohen cannot use that term at all. It's like you would say,
no, he can use it.
Comments, right? It was on Pesach.
Right, but the fact of the matter is that he couldn't use it, but he can use it after Pesach. The fact is, I took away truma from the world. I have to bring truma back into the world. That's really the way that it seems the way you're looking at it. The Gemara now says, Tanan Hasa. So the Mishnah says, Ha'ochel truma b'shogeg mishalim keren v'chaymesh, that if a person eats truma unintentionally, he's got to pay back the principal plus 25%. Echad ha'ochel ve'echad ha'shoyse ve'echad ha'sach. It makes no difference whether you ate it, whether you drank it, let's say it's wine or oil, or whether you anointed it in the case of oil. Echad truma tameh ve'echad truma tahora. And it makes no difference whether it's truma that's tameh or tahor, even if it's tameh and it cannot be eaten, but it can still be used as fuel. And so therefore you have to make restitution. Mishalem chaymesh v'chumsha d'chumsha. And you have to also pay chaymesh, you have to pay 25% above what you consumed. Plus, if let's say after you pay back the keren v'chaymesh, then let's say you're a real shlemiel, you accidentally go ahead and take you take the chomesh and consume it accidentally. So then you'd have to pay back a fifth of that, 25% of that 25%. Okay? So ibayalu. So now the question is raised, kishahu mishalim lefi mida mishalim or lefi dami mishalim. That when you pay back, do you pay back according to measure or according to value? Meaning, if I stole a bushel of wheat, do I pay back a bushel of wheat, or do I look at the value of the bushel of wheat at the time of the consumption, and whatever that value is, I convert that into cash? So obviously the difference is going to be when there's a fluctuating market. When the price of wheat has either gone up or gone down from the time that I consumed it, what's going to be the halach? And then, of course, we're going to have to hold that up to the scrutiny of our Mishnah and see where we end up with, and that's going to be in tomorrow's DAF. Have a wonderful day.